In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Pepin, CEO of Course-Educa, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful Podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. Grief is sometimes the road that leads us to our true purpose. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin, and today's episode explores three powerful themes: transforming grief into growth, living authentically beyond loss, and honoring life through purpose. My guest is Diane Taylor, a grief mentor, professional speaker, and the founder of Life After Loss Coaching. After losing both her husband and young daughter, Diane found herself at a crossroads. Rather than succumbing to despair, she chose to walk through the pain and emerge with a mission to help others do the same. In this episode, Diane shares how our greatest strategies can lead to profound healing, resilience, and personal transformation. Through a blend of deep emotional wisdom and practical guidance, she offers a new way of understanding grief, not as something to overcome, but as a sacred champion in our human experience. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let the world know with a like, a small review, or even a quick share. Your support helps more people find meaningful content just like this. Let's begin. Miss Diane Taylor, welcome on the Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing fabulous, Sam. Thank you so much for having me today.
It's lovely seeing you here, and very, very eager for quite a meaningful conversations. To kick us off, tell us more about Glow Leadership.
Absolutely. So Glow Leadership was founded in 2013 after I left a 20-year corporate career in human resources. So what I do now is I help senior leaders build winning teams. And I do that through various offerings. I do hybrid leadership development courses. I do coaching retainers. And I also support organizations with their people practices and strategy.
Beautiful, beautiful. So let's have you take us back basically to sort of the beginning of all of this. So you said that you had a corporate job for 20 years.
Yeah.
You were in HR. Tell me more about basically how that got to happen, sort of your path basically all the way from to that job, please.
Yes. So when I graduated from the University of Calgary, I was very fortunate to be selected by my women's fraternity as the first Canadian chapter consultant. Wow. And what that exciting job was to travel to university campuses across North America. I did 16 in the United States and Western in London, Ontario. And I would visit for a week, complete reports, meet with officers, develop young women, meet with university professionals. And then I came back to Canada after that, and I started in a career as a management trainee. Shortly after, probably about 3 to 4 months later, the human resources spot opened for the first time. And of the 7 people that applied, because of my experience, I was fortunate to be chosen as the best candidate and started my career in human resources. And the rest was history.
That's what they say. That's great. Thank you so much for clarifying that. I suppose to sort of kick off these conversations, what do you think inspired you to basically go from corporate to establishing Glow Leaderships? And I suppose what did you see gap-wise in the leadership coaching industry?
So I'm not sure that I was necessarily inspired to become self-employed. My father was an entrepreneur, so yes, it's in my blood. And yes, I believe that it was my divine purpose to be an entrepreneur. But how I got there was the universe pushed me. And back at that time, I was working for one of Canada's largest retailers. And my 2012 was one of the hardest years of my life. It started with my father passing away in January, coming home from the celebration of life to learn that I was going to be facilitating the closure uh, and eliminating jobs for the closures of 5 big box locations in Western Canada. After we completed that task, I eliminated 5 support departments from British Columbia to move them to another province. And then I was one of 1,000 managers across Canada that was above a certain level, and my position was eliminated. So it was a situation where I was pressured to rise up. It was a Phoenix moment. And I'm so grateful for that because I really love what I do. It hasn't always been easy, I'll be quite honest, but it, I just couldn't be happier with what I get to do every day now.
Beautiful. You have this concept, which is the conscious approach to success, sort of elevating basically your potentials, which actually that book became a bestseller, which is very interesting. I had the chance to sort of preview it quite briefly, which I think gives me some more background about exactly what you're trying to achieve. But from your perspective, not just the audience perspective, but from your perspective, what core message do you want basically readers to take away, and why did you basically go with the writing medium in the first place?
Right. I sort of did it backwards. A lot of people will write a book and then they'll develop coursework and classes and support people and coach them after. But I did that backwards. So I have been coaching and training and teaching leaders now for so long. But I felt like, and when my leaders finish one of my programs, we have something called a celebration and culmination of learning, where they come and they do a presentation of what their takeaways were. Those are my best days ever, to see the change in the people I've been working with over the last 4 months or 4 weeks. And it's absolutely incredible. But I realize that not every person out there has an opportunity where their company pays to bring me in to be a part of a leadership cohort. And I really wanted to help people elevate their potential in a meaningful way and reach more people. So what's a good way to do that? Have a book available for $20. So that's what motivated me to write the book.
Right. So sort of you have a service which you productize and make in mass market through having a book available. That's something that we see quite often. I think it's a beautiful way to do that. In your perspective, and I guess I was able to get some of those from the preview, but what are some of the biggest roadblocks that prevents typical leaders from reaching their full potentials? And I suppose, how is the conscious approach being able to tackle them in a way that we can overcome them?
Yeah. So there's a lot of myths out there that are holding people back. The people I coach over the years, they'll point to things outside of themselves as the reasons why they might not be getting promoted. There's a glass ceiling for women. Well, if I look up, there's no glass ceiling. That's a construct someone made up that's holding you back. If I work more hours and prove to them, that I'm the hardest worker here, that I put in the most time. But I have the honor and privilege to be at the table with senior leaders when promotional decisions are being made. And I know why people are not getting promoted, and it has nothing to do with those things people believe. It has to do with the fact that people are not able to influence or get the buy-in of other people. And why is that? Because there's some internal unhealed something going on that is making them show up poorly and block that ability to influence and that ability to gain buy-in. So if I'm to summarize, what is the basic definition of leadership? It's to influence others to align with your business objectives to create success with ease. So, but if we go back to, sort of the premise of the book, each one of us is born into this life as a perfect human being. And then stuff happens to us, and that stuff affects us. And if we don't process that, which most of the time we don't, because we might not have the awareness, that goes into our subconscious usually, and that's what creates our triggers. And it's our triggered behaviors that are really not that appealing and actually hold us back from being promoted or from doing the things that we need to do in our personal lives as well to create the success in the lives we really desire.
Very interesting. The world of leadership, I think you will agree with me, as is involved actually not only over the years. I think it's continuously basically evolving to basically as your approach basically changed since you've been in this game, if you will, for now many decades. As your approach changed basically to, or I suppose involved to adapt yourself within a changing landscape of leaderships. Tell me more about sort of are the core leadership, I suppose, rules of today also apply 20 years ago, or how similar or different it is overall?
I would say no, but we didn't have the awareness we used to have, so the style, like there's a lot of things that come into play, in my leadership course, I teach about the generations in the workplace and how different that is, right? We currently have 5 generations in the workplace. What baby boomer workers needed, how they were communicated to, how they were motivated, is extremely different than how a millennial or a Z is motivated. So what has changed about the landscape in the workforce is the generations. And I think it's a beautiful thing because each generation we get a more conscious being. And it's very well known that the older generation will say, oh, they're terrible and they're this and that. And it's because they fear them because they're different. And they push back against something that is different instead of going, wow, this is really cool. This is something that's different that can expand us and help us grow, and it's going to help us innovate. That's not the usual approach. And we've seen it with every single generation, looking down upon the next generation which we typically raised, as not as good, but they are. They're just different, and we need to embrace that. So a conscious leader has that understanding, has that openness, doesn't see the next generation as a threat or a negative thing.
Sure. You mentioned, and I totally agree with you, that the difference basically between generations. Can you dive a little bit deeper from what you mean on this? And I suppose from your experience between managing those 5 sort of working generation, if you will, how important it is nowadays for a leader to be not only conscious about this, but also understand its implication within workplace cultures and pretty much everything else that supports this concept.
Yeah. So we're globally in a war on talent. And currently, we might not be experiencing or feeling the pressure of that quite as much because of the, political nature that's creating fear and affecting the economy. However, the reality is we are in a global talent war. The boomers, which was the mass, if we look at the numbers across the board, they had way more people than any other generation that came after. They're leaving the workforce en masse. We're just at the little tail end of that generation that is in the workplace. And the generations coming after just aren't in the same numbers. So we need immigration. We need AI technology advancements to make up for that gap. So, and we need as many people from different generations we can on top of that. So we, as a leader, we need to understand how, first of all, why? Why are the generations different? Well, based on when they were raised, based on their technological influences or non-technological influences, that impacts the way they show up, their needs. based on the fact that if they come to work and work hard, their paycheck will allow them to buy a house or not. And so maybe if I can't buy a house, maybe I will travel instead. The influences of the economy, the technology create the whys in the generations different. Plus, I believe that with each generation, we're getting to a new level of consciousness. Each generation is more conscious than the last. But as a leader, it's our responsibility, or it's not even a responsibility, but if you want to be a great leader and you want to get your job done with ease and have enough people on your team to do that, understanding the different generations and understanding how to motivate them, to influence them, to get them on the team, rowing with the team in the direction you want to go is a game changer.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's already the second time you mentioned how generation by generation we become more conscious, which is very interesting actually. Tell me more about from a not only a biological standpoint, but from a practical, tangible standpoint,
Right.
why that is the case. And to I suppose juxtapose to that question, feel free to use any layers to
Yeah.
formulate your answer. There's this sort of, and I'm obviously from the youngest generation, that is currently working, and there's this sorts of enlightenment that we can feel nowadays with these younger people. Tell me more, like I said, about how that melt into this understanding that every generation will become more conscious.
Right. So I always look at the 4 dimensions in which humans relate: the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
So if I go back, not to my parents' generation, but my grandparents' generation, those were the pioneers. My grandmother's family came from England when she was 3 years old, and they actually, had a horse and carriage and, went into Western Canada in the middle of the prairies and physically had to start everything. So they were the physical. And then that provided opportunities for the next generation, my parents, to move up sort of a different level. And, some of them experienced a university education or a trade, or they got to go through more of a mental process that the generation before them didn't. But if I look at, my parents and their generation and what they wanted from an emotional perspective, or how they thought about the emotional perspective, that's the generation that just soldiered on. And if you went to therapy, you were weak because
Right.
they had no real understanding. They had a lack of awareness about the emotional realm. They were just gifted to be thinkers, and being thought leaders was really fabulous and honored. But they gave me, the Gen X's, a different opportunity. So what happens is my generation seeks to connect deeper. We're willing to get divorced because we want something real. We're allowing to move up and ascend into the emotional realm. My children, who are 26, almost 26, and 21,
Congratulations.
thank you, have now the opportunity to be these beautiful, conscious human beings because I have expressed emotion with them. I didn't hide. I didn't pretend and put on a face. I experienced emotion with them. We talked about things. We talk about feelings and emotion. We all have experienced therapy. It's okay. It's actually really cool because, taking care of ourselves is an important piece of what we do. So that sets them free to ascend yet up another level. And that's where we create consciousness. And that is how each generation is up-leveling in terms of their consciousness.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. There's Daniel Goleman was talking about the fact that emotional intelligence is the silent force behind impactful leaderships, which I totally agree with him. And emotional intelligence is now something that psychologists has been studying for quite a bit of time, not that long compared to other concepts, but still few decades. And we've been seeing more and more study comes out to be that basically solidify and justify the fact that basically EI is even more important than IQ in the actual tangible world, which that's surprised a lot of people. We used to have sort of this the Bill Gates mindset, which is just bolster your intelligence, and the more intelligent person was basically will win. And to a certain extent, that is sometimes the case. But I think we live in a world where working smarter instead of working harder is not only just a cliche, but truly something that we see people succeed with. I'm really, really interested into what are some of the key exercise or strategies that you think leaders can use to develop emotional intelligence.
Yeah, so it is interesting the balance. What's more important? Is it IQ, EQ? And there's a great Harvard Review paper on the higher the IQ, the lower the coachability, right? A lot of and it comes down to our society. We value, the thought leader. Well, I'm really smart, so everyone else should just be smart. But when we talk about leadership, it's not just about us. It's about, again, the ability to influence people. Being really smart doesn't mean that you have 1% ability to influence people. It means that you should be in a corner working on your calculations or whatever. So I definitely believe it's a combination of the two. And that when we can balance between those two things, create a balance between IQ and EQ, we get to a better place. And balance is the answer for a lot of things. Balance in yin and yang energy. If we go back to Carl Jung and his archetypes, and understand that, we need to balance our yin and yang, our feminine and masculine within each of us, we show up better. So I would say the biggest thing, if you want to grow as a leader, is to come in to yourself and learn about yourself and work on development and healing, we could call it, of your own stuff. And that's one of the things I do in my book is I walk the third last section of the book is all do this and try this, and here's an exercise. And it's all about helping people go through, because we're never taught that anywhere. That was something personally I had to figure out over a long time, probably doing it the hard way and the bad way and the wrong way. And so that's why I've tried to put that together for people so they don't have to struggle as much as I did through climbing the corporate ladder the hard way.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's very interesting. There's this very interesting thing with basically IQ as a whole and what we consider basically to be an intelligent person. One of my favorite concepts of all time is that geniuses and people that are truly intelligent are not those that basically construct difficult ideas. They're the one that can deconstruct them to basically be able to share it with the majority and therefore increase clarity. I think it's the best thing with leaders, right? To a certain extent, you need to be able to turn that complexity into clarity if you'd like to basically lead and, like you said, influence people, which ultimately is what a leader does. I suppose when you're thinking about this sort of liaison between the two, what is your approach to help leaders sort of not only navigate but identify those complex business challenges and therefore, I suppose, put them in a way, encapsulate them in a way that people can not only understand but follow their leads?
Well, I typically work with the leaders to coach them on how are you getting the buy-in, and is that working, and is the communication plan working, and are you getting the results that you would like to see, and are the people practices in place to support the team, aligning with where you're going. And then I have the privilege of, calling them out when they are going to do something that isn't helping them get to the place. The challenge with learning and development or professional development is that 10% of it can happen in a classroom, 20% via coaching, and 70% happens on the job,
By doing, yeah.
right? So in my leadership development courses, I actually have in each module a call to action to apply in the workplace. And I say, you could try this or that, but apply this in the workplace so that we're creating that. So while I'm coaching senior leaders, they're bringing their challenges to me and we're solving for them. And a lot of the times I'm shifting their belief to a higher perspective so that they can understand more clearly, okay, I need to outwit, outsmart, outplay, or I need to step back out of my warrior mode here because it might give me an immediate result, but there could be some blowout from that, or there could, long term, that's not a good strategy. So those are the two ways I try to, it has to be a practice. It can't be, I've seen managers over the years, oh, I read 10 books a week, and great. How have you changed as a leader as a result of that?
Yeah, 10 books a week is probably not recommendable. Let's go this far. You're definitely, your brain will go into habituations and doesn't retain nearly as much information as you'd like to think. But
Mm-hmm.
from that perspective, I think that the one thing that is very interesting, and it's actually one of my favorite quote of all time by Dean Koontz, which is intuition is seeing with the soul. You talk a lot about the power of intuitions in leadership, which and also decision making, which I think is very interesting. I think it's a topic that we don't talk enough about.
Right.
I was actually, we interviewed a transformational shaman on the show, which was lovely, and she was going through the fact that actually intuition is something that you can work on, just like any basically practice.
Right.
You can increase your intuitions by working on it and being
Right.
conscious towards it. I suppose to start broad within these conversations, how do you see basically intuition being integrated into leadership coaching?
I think it's one of my personal greatest gifts that allows me to get further along with my clients than if I didn't. And I would add one thing to what you said about intuition. It's not that we're growing our intuition. Our intuition is there. It's always there. It's our ability to
Yeah.
trust our intuition. And that's where we have to practice, right? Because it is powerful, powerful. And if we're trying to separate ourselves from being a good leader to a great leader, that's where we need to ascend, just not just in the mind, but if we go to the heart and the soul and our intuition, that's where the magic lies, right? And traditionally that has been seen, oh, that's not acceptable in the boardroom. That's not a, corporate thing. That's woo-woo. We don't want any of that woke culture, right? Well, too bad, because you could be way better if you tap into all the parts of you, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I think where I see it the most in terms of from a coaching, the application of intuition is I will say to someone, well, we can take some time and think that through, but what's your blink? You might have heard of the book called Blink. Blink is about what's your right now, if you had to make the call, we don't have to make a decision today, but if you had to, what would that be?
Okay. No, I'm not familiar with that
Right.
concept, actually.
Yeah. Usually within the first 5 minutes, you know the answer, right? And when it comes time to making the right hire, we know, oh, well, but I just need to fill this, but I don't feel really right about this person, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm going to ignore my intuition, and then we get into a worse situation. Or, to move someone out of the organization, I can usually go into a new organization and have like a meeting with, core people, or be in a coaching situation with a company for a month, and I know intuitively who needs to go. And often it will take a year after I share that thought with someone in a senior level until they get to the point where they know.
A year.
Yeah, they know, but they don't trust that they know, right?
Sure.
So it's just, oftentimes there is. And the reason why is because we've been trained to believe that that intuition is woo and therefore not valid. And our thoughts are almighty, right? Being a thought leader is the greatest thing you can be called. So we think, and waste our time and waste our energy. And when we knew all along.
It's interesting actually that some people believe that intuition is woke because it's been a concept for thousands of years now. So I don't actually the more you read, and especially when you're thinking about biblical texts and ancient basically histories, all the greatest leaders you can name, they're all people that were extremely intuitives. Marcus Aurelius being probably the best example. It's very interesting that this sort of, like you said, there's sort of this phase now within this modern history that intuition became basically woo-hoo, where it's actually quite the opposite. It's very traditional way of existing, because that's also another thing I wanted to talk to you about. There's this sorts of comprehension in the world, especially within this performance-based world where we both live in Canada, so obviously this North American culture of performance first and it being basically the most important things in your whole life. And sometimes, and again, I've been around way less basically long than you did, but there's this sort of mentality where I feel with a lot of people, they're not living. They're basically sort of in a very robotic way, sort of going through what they think they need, or their boss basically think basically that they need to do, and therefore sort of lose what makes them special, which is their soul, which is their intuition, which is God, perhaps. Have you seen that? And I suppose, how can we harmonize this a bit more in a way in which I suppose accommodate for who we are as beings?
Oh, honey, I've lived it myself. I graduated from university. Check. I got married to my first husband. Check. I started my corporate career. Check. I got divorced. Oops. I climbed the corporate ladder. Check. I made it to this level of women's pay in Canada. Check. I made it to the next level, women's pay level in Canada. Check. I ended up lying flat, burnt out, dead on the field. My position was eliminated. Oops. Like, life cannot be measured in what we accomplish. And when it comes time for my celebration of life, do I want people to say, well, she graduated from university and she was this, and blah, blah, blah. No, I want them to say she was an amazing mother. She was the best, most loyal friend I could ever count on. She was always there for me. She listened to me. She saw me. Right? So we're often misaligned. And our performance driven hustle culture is killing us all. It's leading to a mental health crisis. Suicide rates are through the roof. And continuing. And young men are the most vulnerable people in that category. We have to stop that and have something different and create well-being and this balance between the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And we need to be retrained around that, as opposed to driving the economy and the organizations that make a lot of money when we're all marching along into this, sick society that we are all paying billions of dollars to
maintain.
Yeah.
It's super interesting, this sort of understanding of sophistication and innovations, which are both buzzwords, and people love to use them. And to a certain extent, I'm a big proponent of technologies, and obviously I think I don't think so. It definitely changed the world, and in many ways for the better. It's just because the way I see it is, first of all, our inability to understand that we are whole within basically ourselves, yourself, right, as your soul and your being. you're enough. You're basically you're everything you
Yeah.
need to succeed and more. Or typically it's the opposite. We're sort of seeking this world where we need external stuff to make us completed. And a lot of people, like you said very brilliantly, do that and check all this list. And when they're on top of that mountain, they're just, oh, all right, this is not how I thought I felt, I suppose. And
Yeah.
and I hear that over and over and over. So let me ask you this to sort of tie in two ideas that we discussed. If we both agree that generation and by generations we consciously elevate basically as a species, then would that be sort of I suppose a honest path, or at least a path that is worth exploring for the newest generations to understand that this world in which causes, like you said, suicide rate to be very high, obesity to be very high, birth rate to be super low to the point of that we're not even replacing our current population, isn't that all great signs that actually there's need to be a pivotal moment from a new generation standpoint, from a new leadership standpoint, to sort of reorganize what is necessary for the world to come back on track? Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. And, the challenge is us as humans need to take authority to reclaim our own lives and do it differently as individuals. And I feel like what we're going through right now in the world is really hard. And, it's horrific, but it is a moment when each individual human being needs to take their power back and stand up to protect their freedom. But beyond that, we all need to step up and say, and not be sheep. We need to bring out the lion in us and say, okay, what do I need to be at my best? Because when I'm at my best, I can serve. But we need a shift in, our universal consciousness. Currently, Mind Valley Academy says that 30% of us are conscious. That means 70% of people out there believe that life is happening to them instead of for them. They're lining up and taking, whatever is prescribed to them that week, because whatever pharma rep came by that doctor's office and they're hot to prescribe that week, which is making big profits for pharma, which is paying for government officials' election campaigns.
Yes.
There's a corrupt, broken system that isn't serving us. So rather than just give our power away to those institutions, make them a possible shareholder in your plan. I'm not saying don't, obviously some people need to have pharmaceuticals. I'm not saying you don't, but make them a shareholder at your table, not God. You are your divinity. Your divinity lies within you and your connection to something outside of yourself that probably isn't the people that are informing you and, providing you the information. So stop doom scrolling. Start to take your power back. My book is a great way to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the power of intentionality is so incredible. It's very interesting. I don't recall we were saying this, but this sort of, like you said, this wheel of influence where the pharmaceuticals, basically companies, own basically the food that you buy, and therefore basically they're also the one, like you said, paying for government campaigns. And there's sort of this wheel where we see our food quality is going down, our people are more sick, the expectancy, the life expectancy is going down basically for the first time since World War II. So there's all these sort of conclusions, which again for the enlightened bunch or the conscious bunch, I suppose the 30% you're mentioning, that's very clear. And to me, and I was looking at this extraordinary research, not a research, was sort of a story told by a psychologist where he was making a distinctions of a typical student compared to traditional religion or spirituality. For example, this concept of a student that wants to learn something every day, and some people, Buddhists basically, for example, follower, which try to unlearn something every day. There's this sort of a of clash between sophistications and, like you said, the power from within. Do you think that we're going in the right direction though concerning this topic from the fact that more people are talking about it? We seem to be more even at least conscious of it, which perhaps is half the battle won. What do you think of that?
I think we're going through a universal conscious awakening. And I think there is a better future. I think we have to get worse to awaken the people. And the people are, I 100% believe in the people. And I 100% believe in the more, conscious next generations that are going to make it right. Because the me generation, where it's all about me and it's all about power and it's all about control, the reality is they're dying off. And what are we going to be left with? These beautiful conscious humans that believe in a we and a community and a beautiful global world where there actually is happiness because no one is fighting, the most beautiful words I've heard all year is put down your sword.
Mm.
What would it be like if we lived in a society where we could just be at ease and we didn't feel like we needed to be so divided? It would feel pretty good. We'd feel pretty happy. We wouldn't be in a mental health crisis.
Yeah, that's another thing as well. Mental health is something that is so key. I mean, my mother used to say very often, a healthy body and a healthy mind, right? A healthy mind gives me a healthy body.
Yeah.
It's that's such a key component of life. I want to sort of go into the conversation of this shift that we've seen basically happening towards not only conscious leadership but also purpose-driven organization. And that's the reason why I was saying, if you were seeing that awakening the way I see it, because nowadays I see more and more, and from the top to bottom, actually, people going out of their way to say we're a purpose-driven, basically organization, we're a value-driven organization, or any basically assimilation of two, three buzzwords combinations for marketing purposes. And trust me, we're in marketing, so I understand that very well. But I suppose outside of that, the potential gimmicks within this within the sole purpose of marketing your organizations, I really want to sort of pick your brains on how you can see basically, and how you help as well actively companies to cultivate the purpose-driven cultures that actually fosters long-term results and success instead of these very quick short-term decision makings.
Right. So what I find with a lot of the organizations I engage with is that they will say, we have a culture, we have values. But upon digging into it a little bit more, it's typically then, I walk around and say to employees on the front line, what are the company's values? And they can't tell you. Oh yeah, those are the things on the wall in the foyer, the pretty posters. So I work with companies either to develop their values from the entire team. It's a process that we do with the entire team, or taking the values that they have and then bringing them off the wall and into the hearts of the employees, because that's where culture happens, is when we take those fancy marketing stuff and we bring it into the heart of the employee. And the spiritual essence of the company is the vision. Where are we going as a team? Where are we going? What is our purpose for coming to work every day? That's the spiritual essence of a company. So a lot of business leaders understand, oh yeah, that's really important, but they don't really get it. So I help them get it and actually take the idea and make it actionable and bring it across down to the entire team so that it can enact a change in culture. And the business leader is always happy to do that because they actually see the results. It does get results.
It seems like one of your many gifts is this concept of taking theoretical, basically concepts and ideas and sort of making them tangibles, right? You're definitely seem to be sort of an action taker. We study basically at the company biological preferences, profiles. That's what's basically make us different from a neuroscientific perspective. And you're sort of have basically a social emotional profile. You seem to be a very empathic person, but then also have basically this sort of understanding that hey, let's make this tangible and actionable, because like you said, posters on the wall are fine, but making sure the employees understand them and are inspired by it, that's much better. The I suppose, how dangerous it is that you think basically how dangerous it is that some companies don't actually, like I said, actively work upon making their company a purpose-driven company. They think that basically saying it out loud is enough, or perhaps, like you said, making some type of fancy ads to sort of try to justify it is enough. How, I suppose, do you see any danger within that for not only the integrity of the brand, but also what does that say about the actual workplace culture?
Well, people can feel that, right? It's not just, so that's in the physical level, saying, having the posters on the wall, and we said that's the physical mental. But if it only lies there, the example I like to use is, imagine driving your car to work with two flat tires, right? So if you want to drive your company only in the physical and mental realm, it's going to be really difficult. You're missing a huge opportunity. In the constant competitive nature of the business world, that would be, to quote a certain prime minister, a really dumb thing to do. Right? It just doesn't make sense. You need to be as competitive and evolving and current as possible if you want to create a successful business. So my thought would be, well, you can try that and good luck. But, I think most, bright people understand the value of working in all the realms to maintain a competitive edge in the fierce competitive market.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that always been fascinating to me is sort of the ripple effect that you see happening when the managements, when the leaders basically decide that, like I said, like you said, our value are XYZ, and from those values we have behaviors, and from those behaviors we have actions, and therefore from those actions we create the results. The ripple effect I found is extraordinary. And I think that it's going to be even more important as moving forward, because technology is going to play a bigger and bigger role within everything that we're doing, specifically from a business development standpoint. So I think it's going to be of the utmost importance that from a leadership standpoint, the leaders understand that in order to keep this group motivated and to keep this group basically humanized and energized, the angle they must take on all the levels that you described will now be at the front and center of the organization, basically's mission moving forward. I really want to. I always has these questions to all the people working with leaders. What's your position towards technology and the use of it, I suppose?
Yes, I'm definitely pro technology. I invest in AI, but it can't replace humans. So what we need to do is we need to have a clear understanding of how humans work. And if you're a leader and you don't know that, then you need to talk to someone like me that does. And then what we do is we take how humans behave, how they're motivated, how they're going to perform at a high level, and we build our technology around that to support that. We don't just bring in technology and, implement it and not have a strategic thought process around it. So the reality is we still need humans to run our businesses, and humans are complex. We can't, it would be great if we had all Tesla robots running our business, but it's just not the reality. So we need to, again, here is a perfect example of we need a balance.
Right.
We need technology. We need humans. We need to understand how the technology affects the humans when we're implementing it. We need to understand how humans can be supported by the technology to inspire, uplift, whatever. And it can be a great balance.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that's the potential biggest leadership challenge that you foresee in the next few years? This harmonizations of technology and human beings.
No, I think the biggest leadership challenge over the next few years is um, employee motivation, mental health.
Okay.
You know, it's about how do the cost of absenteeism, the cost of sick days, the cost of lack of motivation is extremely harmful to businesses. So that's we came out of COVID and we didn't fix it. And now we're in this crazy, we are all living, alternative reality we're all living in every single day right now. That's just crushing more souls. It's a lot for the human spirit to take. People have their own stuff going on. And then, the business leaders have more fear now because of how is this going to impact my business? And are things going to be okay? Am I going to have to lay off all my staff? And that is our challenge, biggest challenge,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Well, no, that's I love that, and to me, and perhaps the way I see it, this is one of the most unpredictable business landscape that we've seen in a while. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
The reason why I say this is because, and I say this more about my readings and my foundings through basically sort of I suppose trying to comprehend fully the world and our surroundings. But one thing that is sort of fascinating, I suppose, is that with AI, with technology being embedded with human beings, with, like you said, sort of the problems that we've been able to mention during this episodes, all of these things are sort of just wildly coming together in sort of this fireball that just is coming at you that you need to make the most of. How do you prepare leaders that basically in their teams to be able to sort of, I suppose, not only manage but thrive within this complex business landscape that we're not only currently in but probably upon ourselves?
Yeah. Well, I think how I support them is through the understanding of how, the decisions the business is making could be impacting, the people they serve, their customers. So how do we, based on that, how do we be heard or seen, or how do we connect with the customer so that, because our customer is similar to our employee, right? Our customers are human and they're
Right.
right now not making decisions and not buying and not committing to contracts because the world has made them freeze. And, oh, I'm just going to wait and see. Everybody's in a wait and see. So if we can cut through that noise, or we can call to action our employees in a meaningful way, or our customers, and give them some sunshine in a cloudy day, we can set ourselves apart. And we, as the leaders or the team of employees, can feel inspired that we're doing that, because that's pretty purposeful.
Yeah.
If we can think beyond the business and think of our customer and our employees as human beings that we're actually helping all through this thing while we're in business and we're making money and, we're adding value, but we're also taking care of the humans. That is greatly purposeful, and on your celebration of life, something that you can be remembered for.
Beautiful. One thing I want to quickly touch upon, because you actually mentioned it twice within this list that you were giving as sort of the checklist, they were specifically woman related goals, and I see this with a lot of women, basically leaders and coaches, where there's sort of this movement of mentoring, of empowerment, and sort of basically yeah, I suppose empowerment of women in leaderships, which I think is very necessary from my perspective, not only business wise but within all decision making abilities. Is it basically as part of your work to basically mentor other women? Is that something that you do actively and seek to do basically, I suppose, in the next few years?
But that's an interesting thing, and I had no awareness that I spoke specifically to women. I believe that each human being has divine feminine and
Yes.
divine masculine in them. And I like to encourage anyone. I coach a lot of men, to be honest.
Okay.
So I coach them to create a balance between their more masculine gifts and bring out these more divine feminine. My own journey, I looked at the models around me. I worked in male dominated industries and I had male examples as leaders. So I sort of took on this uber yang energy, masculine energy, and you can see it in me as I speak, right?
That's what I was
My
saying to you when I was describing your profile. Yeah.
right. On a disc profile, I'm half red and half yellow, half driver and half cheerleader. It's a nice
Oh,
balance
it's an
though, right?
interesting
We
one.
we
Yeah.
create balance. But I have had to learn and soften. And as I have softened, and as I continue to learn to be softer and more vulnerable, I get better results and I have less burnout.
Yeah. This actually the harmony of energy is something that is fascinating, and I always been very interested within all of that, to sort of understand, because you're totally right. With different basically variables, different percentage, people are masculine energy and feminine energy,
Yeah.
and we always, depending on our, not always, but very often, depending on our roles and our surroundings, either suppress or try to embrace or enhance one, excuse me, sort of artificially, just to fit in, which is
Mhm.
just a base concept of human survival. But I see that there's sort of this sort of, I suppose, this new door that is half open, which is, again, sort of this authenticity narrative that we've been seeing more and more, of embracing basically who you are, how you are, and just basically that's truly your best self, is not trying to change you into whatever is working or should work, but find the ways in which you can make yourself work, because again, you're whole and complete from within. Have you also seen, basically, I suppose, within your professional role, and sort of, what, like you said, sort of being in male dominated industry, and therefore sort of, I suppose, I suppose, empowering yourself and enhancing your masculine side. Have you seen that it's easier nowadays, basically, to also communicate within this feminine energy, even for not only yourself but males that you work with?
I think so, yeah, and, I work with m men and women leaders, and it's all each one of them. If I think through, the top leader of the companies I work with, and what are their challenges? It's typically balancing and finding the sweet spot between the vulnerability, the nurturing, the empathy, or it's the opposite, where we're bringing out more confidence and self-belief and those types of um, more, male energy based types
Sure.
of things. So I think within each human, there is um, a need to balance. That's one of the things that we have to learn about ourselves. Um, but I think it's safer. When I think about women and men, I think women have been oppressed in the physical and mental realms, but men have been oppressed in the emotional and spiritual realms. And, Lewis Howes wrote a really great book called The Masks of Masculinity. And men were taught, suck it up. Men don't cry, all these things. They don't talk to their friends about their emotion. But our new generation's mothers had a voice in their upbringing. And so they're stepping more fully into that.
Absolutely.
My son is very fluent in emotion. And, you know, hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Right? It just is. And if you were to meet him, and people might be surprised about that, because he's kind of a 6 foot tall
Yeah.
tough young man that's going to be a firefighter. But he has a lot of heart, and he can speak about his emotion. And, but he is the newer generation where it was safe to do so.
Right. And that's actually a strength. Absolutely. I think there's something beautiful
Yes.
about all of that. Um, just very quickly to finish us off, what legacy do you hope to leave through Glow Leaderships? And I suppose tell me more about your work with leaders around the world, and I suppose what's next? What's the future of it?
Yeah. So my legacy is really to help people reach their full potential. And that is guiding them through a self-awareness process parallel to helping them take their own power back and to understand the authority lies within them, and to help them be more grounded and stable in the knowingness that were divinely created to be here with a purpose, and to fully embrace that and move forward with more confidence and less self-doubt.
Beautiful. Miss Diane Taylor, thank you so much for spending the time with me on the Meaningful Podcast. I believe it was an extremely insightful conversation, and I would love if you can share some last words of wisdom with our audience.
Well, Sam, it's been a real delight having this conversation with you. You're a very gifted host, so thank you so much. And to everyone out there, if you're with us at this point in the interview, that means that you have already committed to yourself and your self-development. So I would love to give you kudos and a lot of praise for that, and continue. You're either growing or dying, so choose the right side of that equation.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.